A good look at that.
Is a tessera corn snake, right?
Yeah.
Tessera.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to today's video. If you're new here, my name's Ryan.
And I'm Kyle. And today, guys, we're gonna be setting up an enclosure for a little corn snake that we picked up at a reptile show. You know, we have to set him up. He just came in a little deli cup, so we decided to make an episode out of it.
Yeah, so when you go to reptile shows, guys, a lot of the time you'll see they put a lot of snakes in deli cups. Now, you don't want to keep them in there too long, so when you get home, well, actually, the best case scenario is you plan ahead of time what snake you're gonna purchase, so you already have a cage set up. But if you don't, we're gonna walk you through how to set that up right now.
When you just fall in love with a snake at a reptile show and not expect it, this is what happens. So, yeah. But he's doing good. We had him in a little temporary setup. He was eating, drinking, so now we're gonna set him up in a much more permanent enclosure that he'll be able to definitely grow into. And
Cut the ribbon. Boom, brand new cage.
so guys, we picked up all these supplies at PetSmart, so we kind of wanted to showcase, you know, what you can easily get for these animals.
And
so
kind of what the cost associated with it is, because you may see a little corn snake sitting on a table that's maybe $30, $40, but when you go in to actually have the full setup for the animal, it turns out to be much more expensive than people think. And we'll walk you through the cost of all these. So, I mean, the cage alone, what was it, 80 bucks?
This
aquarium?
Yes, this aquarium with the lid, the fancy reptile lid, the fancy reptile aquarium, even though, oh, it's a terrarium, it's not an aquarium, so you gotta pay more for the terrarium. But it came with a fancy lid, so I had to get it.
Yeah.
So, on a budget, get an aquarium. But this is really nice because it does seal it a lot better, so especially with the snakes, you know, they're always trying to slip out. So it's good to just have a more secure setup for them.
Yeah, so we'll walk you through kind of how to set it up. Kyle, want to give me a hand? We'll get this out of the box real quick. Yeah, that box. Boom. Now what you're going to want to do too is make sure you get all the stickers off and also clean. Let me grab some real quick. So what I like to use for disinfecting is actually, it's called Rescue. Now it's a hydrogen peroxide mix, and it's used for a lot of veterinarian uses, as you'll see there. Now what you do is you just spray down the enclosure. And you want to make sure you do this in a well-ventilated area, because I assume that you don't want to be breathing in all these chemicals, which is just hydrogen peroxide, but it says ventilate well, so we'll do that. And while that's sitting a little bit, we're going to show you kind of some other stuff that we got. So for bedding today, why don't you tell me what we're using, Kyle?
So we're gonna be using cypress mulch. You find corn snakes down here in South Florida, so it seems to be that they definitely like higher humidity. I mean, like you said, they're a very tolerable snake. They're a great beginner snake, so they can take more drier areas like the aspen bedding. But I prefer the cypress mulch just because, again, it's much like South Florida here. It holds the humidity super well. It already comes very moist, so again, it's a lot like the South Florida soil. So
give me 1 second to get this rest of this in. And it did mention humidity, so guys, you're gonna want to keep corn snakes between 50 and 70% humidity. If you're having some issues, if you don't have a little gauge, when you have the snake at home, a good way to tell is you'd rather go a little bit more dry than more wet, because if you go a little dry, they'll have they'll kind of have stuck shed, and that's a way to know to increase humidity. And you can also soak them and get them off, or get that stuck shed off. However, if you go too humid and make it a little too wet in there, they can get respiratory infections. So that's why I always say lean more towards a little bit more dry, because then you can adjust and not have to deal with like a sick snake.
So what do you recommend as far as regulating humidity? You recommend misting bottle, a mister system?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it goes with substrate. So if you have, like I said, if you get the little gauge, you'll know where the humidity level is at. You can use aspen bedding, or if you are in a drier climate, the cypress mulch, or even like eco earth, and you can make it a little bit more humid. Mm-hmm. And that way you can regulate the humidity there. If that doesn't work and you're already using eco earth, you can get some sphagnum moss. And what you'll do with that is you have the enclosure all set up, and you'll add the sphagnum moss underneath the little hide, and you'll make sure that it's moist as well, and that will increase humidity, and it'll be like a humidity box, and that will help the snake shed.
Mm-hmm. So now can I add it?
Yeah, now we're all clean. And this stuff's safe to use once you dry it off, to just put substrate in and the animal in.
Obviously, you're more of a snake guy, Ryan, so what do you recommend as far as the I guess, the thickness of the soil.
Yeah, so I like to make it, I mean, let's see here. I kind of get a feel for it. You want to make sure it's all covered and you don't see any part of the bottom of the cage is kind of peeking through. You want to make sure it's fully covered, which this is about right. You want to go ahead and add that water bowl?
Yeah, just realized this may not fit, especially with...
So the
now we'll have
beautiful
to
part of
dig
that, yeah, so we'll dig it in. And this is going to be on the hot side. Or actually, let's set it in the middle.
Yeah. So I was going to say, if we have the heat lamp here, it's probably going to get pretty hot, so good to have it right in the middle.
So what we'll do is we'll just bury this. It makes it look a little cool too. Little cool. Then you want to put that water bowl in?
Yeah, sure. So this will be the hot side, Ryan?
Yeah, I'll make this.
Okay, so we'll keep the water bowl over here.
And we did get a few different hides. Now what that's gonna do is, since this is a baby snake, you're gonna wanna make it feel secure. Let's say we did a basic setup where it's just a water bowl, one hide, and that's about it. The snake's gonna get really scared and stressed because it is a baby. In the wild, these guys are hiding because they are at the bottom of the food chain. So when you bring a little baby snake home, make sure you give it plenty of places to hide and feel secure.
Yep. So then we also have a burrow down here. So we got the hot side, intermediate side, and then this will be the nice and cool side.
Yeah.
Again, this is a very small snake, so just have it where it's a little bit of room for him.
Yeah, and then we got this little vine too, so that's pretty cool. So it just adds another feature to the cage. And you can add it all here. You know, this will actually stick to the glass too, so keep it all in place. And what I'm doing now, so I have the vine going over this hide, as well as the main hide in the trunk, and this hide at all the entrances. That way when it's inside there, it has just that extra layer of security. It's a little darker and it feels more secure, and like it's not being looked at. And I know when you get a snake, you're gonna wanna look at it, you're gonna wanna see your snake, but for the first week or so, maybe a little longer depending on the snake, let it just adjust. When the snake's comfortable in its enclosure, it'll start to come out and just kind of wander around, and that's when you'll be able to enjoy seeing it.
Would you recommend making sure it eats first before you really mess with it as well?
Yeah, I'd feed it first.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to overly stress them, because then you just lead to all sorts of issues.
Yeah.
And I think this cage is pretty well, it's gonna be pretty humid, so I wouldn't add the sphagnum moss to it, just because, yeah, the substrate's pretty moist. But if you needed it, this is what you'd use.
So corn snakes are found throughout South Florida here and throughout Florida. So this climate is perfect for them. So we're actually gonna keep this guy outside just because, I mean, there's no point in trying to replicate that when it's right outside. So obviously we are gonna get a cold front in the next couple days. I'll pull him inside the whole enclosure. But the majority of the time will be outdoors. But we have a heat lamp here just to replicate how you would set it up indoors.
Yeah, and keep in mind, guys, when you're keeping it out here, it's all covered. So it is outdoors in a natural temperature, but it's also a covered environment, so it doesn't have direct sunlight. You don't want to leave a snake in a glass cage in the sunlight, because it's just gonna
or outside.
No good. Or outside in general. Yeah.
Because obviously with the rains down here, this tank could flood in a matter of minutes.
Now the cool thing about this lid is there's a lot of little latches here to make sure that it's secure to the enclosure, because snakes are escape artists. If you give them an inch, they will take a mile. If they can fit their head through, they are gone. And in my earlier days, back when I was like 5 or 6, starting to keep some snakes, I learned that the hard way. So don't learn from me. Don't repeat my mistakes.
Didn't you have a bunch of them get loose in the house?
That's a story for another time. Yeah, I had little garter snakes had babies in my house, and the holes were too big for the babies. So if you can imagine, my parents were not very happy.
All right, now that the lid is on, his water bowl is filled, it's time to add the snake.
Yeah, and show them the snake real quick. Give them a good look at that.
Is a Tessera corn snake, right?
Yeah.
Tessera. Do you know much about the morph itself?
So I'm not a huge corn snake guy, so I don't know much about the morphs.
Yeah.
I know it is very pretty and it's cool, and you're probably not going to breed it, so it doesn't matter all that much.
Very true.
And it just makes a cool pet. Now the cage we're using, it's a 20-gallon, so it is a little large for a baby corn snake. But instead of just putting a 10-gallon and then upgrading to a 20 later, since we put so much substrate in here and so much places for it to hide, a 20-gallon's gonna be fine. It'll grow into it.
See you, buddy.
And a cool thing about adding the tree to it is corn snakes are actually semi-arboreal. I've found them out in the wilds here in Florida, actually in trees.
Honestly, the majority of the time I find them here is almost at the top of the perimeter fence, so 8-foot high perimeter fence. That's the vast majority of the times I see them, either that or on foliage for sure. So
Okay.
you rarely find them on the ground.
Yeah. So nice and natural for them. So we're gonna go ahead and lock them in here, and then want to show them the light dome.
Yeah. So again, we're gonna keep this guy outside, but just to show you guys how to set them up a little better for indoor use, we definitely recommend a heat light. Again, like Ryan said before, there's a hot side and a cold side. Just because of them being reptiles, they have to thermoregulate. So it's best to set them up this way, right?
Yeah, and basically what you're going to want to do for temperature gradient wise is you're going to want the cold side between 75 and 82, and then the hot side, I would say 80 to 85, and a basking spot. So as you see on the rock, that's going to provide for a basking spot of around 88 to 92 is where you're going to want it. So that gives you a good temperature gradient, and using a 20-gallon enclosure rather than a 10 allows us to space that temperature out and kind of give him some more spaces to kind of figure out, oh, I like it colder, I like it hotter. He can thermoregulate himself, which is pretty nice.
We do have another corn snake that will be going in a different enclosure. Let's pull this little guy out.
So Kyle got carried away with corn snakes at the show.
Well, I thought they were buddies. This one is a little testy, but again, these are still great beginner snakes because they are very tolerable. I mean, she does rattle her tail like a rattlesnake every once in a while, but she's never tried to bite. So this is just a regular corn snake, so you can see the difference between that tessera before and the regular coloration of them. But this is a het scaleless, correct?
Yeah, het scaleless.
So obviously, if you produce it with another het scaleless, you will get scaleless individuals. But
yes,
again,
scaleless is a simple recessive trait. So much like albinism, it's the same kind of breeding.
Yeah. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed seeing how we set up the little corn snakes here.
Yeah, and hopefully you'll be able to use this for other species of snakes if you don't keep corn snakes, ball pythons, red-tailed boas. I hope you found this video valuable, and if you did like it, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Also follow us on Instagram, Primitive Predators, and we'll see you on the next episode.